The rain-slicked asphalt of the Brooklyn gym parking lot gleamed like a black mirror under the sodium lamps, reflecting the jagged skyline of Manhattan in the distance. Charles's heart hammered against his ribs as Kyle's truck screeched to a halt beside him, the door flying open before the engine even died. "Get in, you idiot, before you drown and I have to explain to your mom why her son's a prune," Kyle barked, his voice rough but laced with that familiar edge of concern that always made Charles's stomach twist. But as Charles slid into the passenger seat, dripping and shivering, Kyle's eyes locked onto his, not with the usual bro-ish grin, but something darker, hungrier, like a man staring down the barrel of a truth he'd buried too long. "What the hell was that look back there?" Kyle demanded, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, the cab filling with the scent of sweat and unspoken secrets. In that suspended moment, with thunder cracking overhead, Charles realized their friendship had just shattered like the first fat raindrop exploding on the windshield. Charles had always known Kyle was the sun around which his world orbited, blinding, unrelenting, and just a little too hot to touch without getting burned. They'd met freshman year at NYU, thrown together in a cramped dorm room that smelled like stale pizza and unwashed socks. Kyle, with his all-American quarterback build, easy laugh, and a smile that could charm a nun out of her habit, was the straight guy poster child, dates with sorority girls, tailgates every weekend, and a playlist dominated by classic rock anthems. Charles, on the other hand, was the quiet art major with paint-stained fingers and a secret Tumblr full of half-written poems about boys who looked like Kyle but never quite measured up. That Friday night in early fall, the air in New York hummed with the kind of crisp energy that made you believe in reinvention. Charles had been dodging Kyle's texts all week, something about bro time at the gym, but when the invite came via a missed call and a voicemail that ended with, "Dude, if you flake again, I'm revoking your best friend card," he caved. It wasn't just guilt. It was the pull, that magnetic drag toward Kyle's orbit he could never quite escape. The Ironworks gym in Williamsburg was a no-frills meat market. Exposed brick walls scarred from years of dropped barbells, mirrors fogged with the breath of hustlers and hopefuls, and a playlist blasting everything from Metallica to trap beats. Charles arrived late, his beat-up messenger bag slung over one shoulder, dressed in faded black joggers and a threadbare Ramones tee that clung to his slim frame. Kyle was already there, mid-set on the bench press, his tank top soaked through, veins popping like rivers on a map across his forearms. Spotting Charles in the mirror, he racked the bar with a clang that echoed like a gunshot and bounded over, all 6'2" of him enveloping Charles in a bear hug that lifted him off the ground. "About time, Picasso. Thought you were ghosting me for some hipster poetry slam." Kyle's grin was infectious, his breath warm against Charles's ear, carrying the faint tang of protein shake. Charles laughed it off, punching Kyle's shoulder lightly, too lightly, maybe, because his knuckles lingered a second too long on the damp fabric. They fell into rhythm like they always did, Kyle barking encouragement as Charles struggled through pull-ups, Charles rolling his eyes but secretly thrilled at the attention while spotting Kyle's deadlifts. "Come on. Lightweight. Channel that inner beast," Kyle teased, his hands brushing Charles's waist to adjust his form on squats. Each touch was electric, a spark Charles catalogued in the recesses of his mind for later, when he'd be alone in his Bushwick walk-up, staring at the ceiling and wondering if Kyle noticed the way his breath hitched. By the time they hit the showers, the gym had emptied out, leaving just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of the L train. Charles stripped down quickly, keeping his back to Kyle, hyper-aware of the steam curling around them like cigarette smoke. He'd seen Kyle naked 100 times. Locker rooms, beach trips, that one disastrous camping weekend in the Catskills, but tonight felt different. Charged. Kyle soaped up with that same casual efficiency, humming along to whatever was playing in his head, water sluicing over the hard planes of his chest and down to the V of his hips. Charles stole a glance, just one, and caught Kyle's eyes on him, steady, unblinking, like he was seeing Charles for the first time. "You good, man?" Kyle asked, voice low over the spray. Charles nodded too fast, mumbling something about a cramp in his calf. But as they toweled off, Kyle stepped closer, closer than necessary, his hand landing on Charles's shoulder with a squeeze that bordered on possessive. "Hey, seriously. You've been weird lately. Like, distant." "Spill." Charles's throat tightened. The words were there, bubbling up like acid reflux. "I love you, you oblivious asshole, and it's killing me." But he swallowed them down, forcing a smirk. "Just stressed. Deadline for that gallery show. You know how it is." Kyle searched his face, those hazel eyes narrowing, then clapped him on the back, hard enough to jolt the air from Charles's lungs. "All right, tough guy. But we're grabbing beers after. My treat." No excuses. The rain started as they hit the parking lot, a sudden downpour that turned the world to liquid silver. Charles bolted for the subway, but Kyle's truck roared up, headlights cutting through the sheets like knives. That's when it happened, the moment that would replay in Charles's nightmares for months. As he climbed in, soaked to the bone, Kyle's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. Not gently. Desperately. "Wait," Kyle said, voice cracking like thunder. "Don't go. Not like this." Charles froze, water dripping from his hair onto the worn leather seat. Kyle's face was a mask of turmoil, jaw clenched, eyes wild. The cab felt too small, the air too thick. What are you?" Kyle leaned in, or maybe Charles did. It didn't matter. Their lips crashed together in a kiss that tasted of rain and regret, Kyle's stubble scraping Charles's skin like sandpaper on silk. It was messy, urgent, teeth clashing, hands fisting in wet shirts and over in seconds, but it carved itself into Charles's soul like a brand. Kyle pulled back first, gasping, his forehead pressing against Charles's. "Fuck," he whispered, the word a prayer and a curse. "I didn't mean shit, Charles. The dam broke then." Charles's vision blurred, not from the rain on the windshield, but from the tears he hadn't realized were falling. "You kissed me," he said, voice barely audible over the wiper's frantic swipe. "After all this time, you kissed me." Kyle's hands trembled as he started the engine, the truck lurching forward into the storm. "I know. God, I know. Just drive. We need to talk. Somewhere safe." They ended up at Kyle's place in Bed-Stuy, a third-floor walk-up in a brownstone that smelled like fresh paint and takeout Thai. Kyle's roommate was out. Bless the universe for small mercies, and the apartment was a shrine to straight guy minimalism. A sagging couch, a flat screen mounted crookedly, posters of the Mets and Bruce Springsteen peeling at the edges. Charles paced the living room while Kyle cracked open 2 IPAs from the fridge, handing one over with fingers that still shook. "Sit," Kyle said, not a request. Charles dropped onto the couch, the bottle cold against his palm. Kyle sat beside him, close, but not touching, and rubbed his face, elbows on knees. "Look, man, I've been fighting this for months. Years, maybe. Ever since that night we got wasted after the Knicks game and you passed out on my shoulder. I woke up with your head on my chest, and it felt right. Too right. Charles's heart stuttered. But you're straight. The girls, the dates you said. I know what I said. Kyle exploded, standing so fast the beer sloshed over his hand. He paced now, caged animal. I thought I was. Hell, I still do, most days. But you're under my skin, Charles. Like a goddamn tattoo I didn't ask for but can't regret. The confession hung between them, fragile as spun glass. Charles set his beer down, reaching out tentatively. Kyle caught his hand, pulling him up, and this time the kiss was slower, exploratory, tongues tentative at first, then deepening with the weight of all the stolen glances and unspoken wants. They stumbled to the bedroom, shedding clothes like old skins. Kyle's body a landscape Charles had mapped in dreams. The freckles across his collarbone, the scar on his hip from a childhood bike crash, the way his abs flexed under Charles's palms. It wasn't perfect. Awkward laughs when knees knocked, a moment of panic when Kyle whispered, "Tell me if it's too much," but it was real. They moved together in the dim glow of streetlights filtering through blinds, Kyle's hands gentle on Charles's hips, his breath hot against his neck. "You're beautiful," Kyle murmured, and Charles believed him, for the first time in years. Afterward, tangled in sheets that smelled like Kyle's cologne, cedar and citrus, they lay in silence, hearts sinking in the quiet. Kyle traced lazy circles on Charles's back. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Charles nodded against his chest. "Yeah. But maybe. For the better." Kyle kissed his forehead. "We'll figure it out. Together." As sleep claimed them, the rain tapping a lullaby on the window, Charles allowed himself to dream, of mornings with coffee and lazy Sundays, of a love that didn't have to hide. But deep down, in the shadowed corners of his mind, a whisper of doubt stirred. How long could a secret like this stay buried in a city that thrived on exposure? The next morning dawned gray and unforgiving, the kind of November light that seeped through the blinds like smoke from a dying fire. Charles woke to the sound of Kyle humming in the kitchen. Springsteen, of course. Thunder Road on low volume, and the sizzle of eggs in a pan. For a heartbeat, he lay there, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, wondering if it had all been a fever dream born of gym endorphins and cheap beer. But the ache in his muscles, the faint bruise blooming on his hip where Kyle's grip had tightened in passion, told him otherwise. He pulled on Kyle's boxers, too big, riding low on his hips, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. Kyle turned from the stove, spatula in hand, his hair a tousled mess, wearing nothing but gray sweats that hung scandalously low. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, voice rough with sleep, but his eyes, God, those eyes, held a softness Charles had never seen, like he'd unlocked a door in Kyle he'd forgotten was there. They ate at the rickety formica table, knees brushing under it, the domesticity of it all wrapping around Charles like a warm blanket. Kyle talked about nothing and everything. The Mets' off-season trades, a client at his construction job who'd stiffed him on payment, the way Charles's laugh lines crinkled when he smirked. Charles listened, stealing glances, marveling at how the man who'd once been a platonic fortress now felt like home. But New York doesn't let you linger in bliss. By noon, Kyle's phone buzzed, a group text from their old crew, the NYU survivors chat that had been pinging since college. "Gym sesh tonight? Beers after." "Who's in?" Kyle showed Charles the screen, eyebrow raised. "You game?" Or we playing hooky for round 2? Charles hesitated, the bubble of their night threatening to burst. We should go. Act normal. Right? Kyle's face fell. Just a flicker, but Charles caught it. Yeah. Normal. He typed a quick in and tossed the phone aside, pulling Charles onto his lap instead. The kiss that followed was lazy, sweet, ending with Kyle nuzzling his neck. But after, you're mine. All night. The gym that evening was packed, bodies slamming iron like it was therapy. Charles and Kyle arrived separately. Precaution, they joked, but it tasted like caution. The crew was there, Mike, the finance bro with a beer gut creeping in. Sarah, Kyle's ex from sophomore year, all sharp wit and sharper heels. And Jamal, the eternal optimist who'd once tried to set Charles up with his cousin. Hugs and fist bumps flowed, easy as always, but Charles felt the undercurrent. The way Kyle's hand lingered on his lower back during a group photo, out of sight but burning through his shirt. They worked out in tandem, the routine a shield, Kyle spotting Charles on curls, Charles trash-talking Kyle's form on rows. Laughter masked the glances that stretched too long, the accidental brushes that weren't accidents at all. Sarah noticed something, her eyes narrowing over her wine cooler later at the dive bar across the street, but she chalked it up to post-workout glow, clinking bottles with a wink. The bar, O'Malley's, was a relic, peanut shells crunching underfoot, neon signs buzzing like trapped flies, the jukebox spitting out Tom Petty anthems. Beers turned to shots. Stories escalated. Jamal's latest Tinder horror. Mike's promotion that came with a side of divorce papers. Charles nursed his IPA in the corner booth. Kyle's thigh pressed solid against his under the table. It was torture and heaven, the proximity a promise of later. Around midnight, the group thinned. Sarah dragged Mike to dance, badly to Free Fallon, leaving Charles and Kyle with Jamal, who was 3 whiskeys deep and spilling about his ex. Man, love's a bitch, Jamal slurred, clapping Kyle on the shoulder. You and that sorority chick last month. Thought you were done for life. Kyle tensed, his beer halfway to his lips. Charles's stomach dropped. Last month, he'd known about the date blind set up via Mike, but the way Kyle's jaw ticked, the flicker of guilt in his eyes, it hit like a sucker punch. Yeah, well, Kyle muttered, forcing a laugh. Not my type. Turns out, Jamal snorted, oblivious. Plenty more fish, bro. Hey, Charles, you got any single artist friends? Need to class up my feed. Charles managed a nod, but his mind raced. The date, the lie, or half-truth, that Kyle had brushed off as nothing happened. But now, in the haze of alcohol and hindsight, Charles wondered, was last night a fluke, a drunken experiment, or had Kyle been playing both sides, dipping toes into waters he could deny come morning? They stumbled out into the night air, the crew scattering with sloppy goodbyes. Kyle hailed a cab, his arm slung heavy around Charles's shoulders. Possessive, or just drunk? Your place or mine? He murmured, lips brushing Charles's temple. Charles pulled back, the words sticking like thorns. What about last month? The girl. Did you? Kyle's face shuddered, the easy warmth evaporating. Jesus. Charlie, not here. Not now. The cab pulled up. They slid in, the silence thicker than the traffic jam on the BQE. By the time they reached Charles's apartment, the fight was brewing, unspoken but volcanic. Inside, the door barely clicked shut before Charles whirled. Tell me. Was it nothing? Or am I just the side quest till you figure out your straight guy itch? Kyle's eyes flashed, hurt twisting into anger. Fuck you, man. You think that's what this is? Some experiment. He stepped closer, crowding Charles against the wall, hands braced on either side. I told you I fought this. For years. Because I was scared shitless of losing you. Of what this city would say. My family. The guys. But you didn't fight last month, Charles shot back, voice breaking. You went out with her. Laughed about it. Like I was invisible. Kyle deflated, forehead dropping to Charles's shoulder. It was one date. A setup. I went to shut Mike up. Nothing happened, swear on my life. I spent the whole night thinking about you, hating myself for it. The admission cracked something in Charles, tears hot on his cheeks. Kyle kissed them away, soft, apologetic, leading them to the bed where apologies turned to touches, slow and reverent. They made love like it was absolution. Kyle whispering I love you into Charles's skin like a vow, Charles clinging like a lifeline. But dawn brought clarity, and with it, the first fracture. Kyle's phone lit up on the nightstand. A text from Sarah. Saw you two last night. What's the deal, Bill? Kyle deleted it without replying, but the seed was planted. Exposure loomed, a shadow lengthening over their fragile new world. Weeks blurred into a secret rhythm. Stolen mornings before Kyle's job site calls. Late-night runs to Charles's studio where paint-smeared canvases doubled as backdrops for hurried trysts. They were careful, separate arrivals at group hangs, coded texts, "Gym later?" Meaning I miss you. But the pull was intoxicating. Kyle opened up in ways Charles had only dreamed. Stories of his conservative Ohio upbringing, the pressure to be the golden boy, the quiet terror of coming out to himself in a journal he'd burned sophomore year. Charles painted feverishly, channeling the chaos into abstracts, swirls of cobalt and crimson that Kyle called our storm. One night, over takeout lo mein on the fire escape, Kyle traced the city lights with his eyes and said, I want this forever. You and me. No more hiding. Charles's heart soared, but doubt whispered, forever in New York? Where walls had ears and secrets were currency. The crack widened at Thanksgiving. Kyle's family was flying in. Mom with her apple pie. Dad with his golf clubs. Sister Emily with her new baby. Charles was invited as the roommate friend, a role he'd played before, but now it chafed like wool on sunburned skin. They rehearsed in Kyle's kitchen, handshakes, small talk, no lingering looks. It'll be fine, Kyle assured, kissing Charles goodbye at the door. 2 days. Then we're back to us. But 2 days stretched into agony. Texts from Kyle were sparse. Mom's grilling me about girls. Kill me. And Charles drowned in his studio, brushstrokes turning violent. On the second night, a call came. Kyle, voice slurred, background noise of clinking glasses. Hey, babe, sorry. Force of habit. They're asking about you. Said you're artistic. Dad wants to know if you're seeing anyone. Charles laughed. Brittle. What did you say? A pause. Too long. Told Em you're single. Busy with shows. The lie landed like a slap. Charles hung up, curling into himself on the studio floor amid tubes of paint and regret. Single. As if their nights tangled in sheets meant nothing. As if he was still the sidekick, not the lover. When Kyle returned, hollow-eyed and hungover, Charles confronted him in the hallway. Am I a secret, or just a phase? Kyle recoiled like he'd been burned. It's my family, Charles. Small-town folks, they wouldn't get it. Not yet. Not yet, Charles echoed, the words ash in his mouth. When, after the wedding, the kids, the fight escalated, voices rising until neighbors banged on the wall. Kyle stormed out, slamming the door, leaving Charles in the wreckage of half-eaten pie and unspoken I love yous. December wrapped New York in tinsel and frost, the city a glittering facade masking the chill seeping into Charles and Kyle's bones. The fight lingered like a bruise, tender, discolored, impossible to ignore. Kyle showed up the next day with coffee and croissants, eyes red-rimmed, mumbling apologies that Charles accepted because what else could he do? Love wasn't a straight line. It was a maze, and they were lost in it together. They patched it with routine, gym sessions that doubled as foreplay, movie nights on Charles's lumpy couch where Kyle's head in his lap felt like victory. But the secrecy gnawed, a termite in the foundation. Kyle dodged family calls, deleted texts from Mike, "You coming to the holiday party solo?" And once, in a moment of weakness, confessed to Charles over whiskey in a dimly lit jazz bar in the village. "I dream about telling them. Walking in with your hand in mine. But what if they hate me? What if I lose everything?" Charles squeezed his hand under the table, the club's saxophone wailing like a heartbroken lover. "You won't lose me. That's something." Christmas Eve found them at a queer-friendly tree lighting in Prospect Park, bundled in scarves and beanies, sipping spiked hot cider from thermoses. Snow dusted the branches like powdered sugar, and for an hour, they were free, dancing badly to carols, Kyle's laughter booming as Charles smeared snow on his nose. "This is it," Kyle said, pulling him close amid the crowd. "This is us." But freedom was fleeting. The new year brought Mike's holiday party, a swanky loft in Soho, all exposed beams and craft cocktails, packed with NYU alums chasing their quarter-life crises. Charles and Kyle arrived together, a calculated risk, just bros, Kyle had said, but his hand on the small of Charles's back said otherwise. The night started strong, backslaps, toasts to another year of surviving adulthood. Sarah cornered them by the charcuterie board, her eyes sharp as ever. "You two are glowing. Spill the tea." She waggled her eyebrows, but there was an edge, like she knew more than she let on. Kyle deflected with a joke about Jim Gaines. Charles laughed too loud. But as the vodka flowed, boundaries blurred. Jamal pulled Kyle onto the makeshift dance floor for a ridiculous robot routine, leaving Charles to fend off questions from an old classmate. "Still single? You're too cute to be unattached." Before he could answer, Kyle was back, arm draping casual over his shoulders. Too casual, possessive in disguise. That's when it happened. Mike, 3 sheets to the wind, clapped Kyle on the back hard enough to slosh his drink. "Heard you ditched that girl from last month." "Smart. She was high maintenance. But hey, if you're looking, my sister's friend." Kyle's face went stone cold. "Not interested, man." "Drop it." Mike blinked, swaying. "Whoa, touchy. What's up with you lately? Ever since you and Charles got all buddy-buddy," he air-quoted, slurring the words, and the room seemed to tilt. Eyes turned subtle, but there. Sarah's brow furrowed. A girl in the corner whispered to her date. Charles's blood ran cold. Kyle's arm tightened, then dropped like it burned. "Nothing's up," Kyle snapped, louder than intended. "Just not in the mood for setups." "Excuse us." He dragged Charles to the balcony, the winter air a slap of reality. Below, Soho streets pulsed with taxis and revelers, fireworks popping in the distance. Shit, Kyle breathed, lighting a cigarette he bummed from Charles, first one in years. That was close. Close. Charles's voice cracked. Mike basically outed us. Or implied. And you just denied it. I didn't deny, Kyle started, but Charles cut him off. You did. With your tone, your body language. Like I'm some dirty secret you're ashamed of. Kyle stubbed out the cig, sparks scattering like dying stars. It's not shame, Charles. It's survival. You think Mike won't blab? Or Sarah? One wrong word, and it's everywhere. My job, my family, the whole fucking world. And what about me? Charles shouted, the party noise swallowing it. I'm surviving too, every time I bite my tongue. Every time I watch you flirt with normalcy while I swallow glass. Kyle reached for him, but Charles stepped back, the railing digging into his spine. I love you, Kyle said, desperate. That's why I'm scared. Love shouldn't feel like fear. The words hung, final as a gavel. They left early, the cab ride a minefield of silence. At Charles's door, Kyle lingered, hand on the frame. Don't do this. Not tonight. Charles met his eyes, seeing the boy from Ohio, the one who'd built walls to keep the world out. Go home, Kyle. Figure out what you want. Because I can't keep being your ghost. The door closed softly, but it echoed like a slam. January dragged, a gray slog of unanswered texts and avoided spots. The gym, O'Malley's, even the park. Charles threw himself into his art. A solo show at a tiny Chelsea gallery looming like a lifeline. Canvases bled emotion. Fractured figures in urban shadows. Lovers reaching but never touching. His therapist, a no-nonsense dyke named Rosa, nodded during sessions. You're grieving, kid. Let it hurt, Kyle. Meanwhile, unraveled in silence. Work suffered, nails hammered crooked, blueprints smudged. He confided in no one, not even Emily during a late-night call where she sensed the fracture. What's eating you, Kai? Talk to me. Can't, he muttered, throat tight. Not yet. The breaking point came mid-February. Valentine's Day, a cruel joke. Charles was at the gallery, hanging the final piece. A massive diptych of two silhouettes merging in rain, titled Orbit, when his phone buzzed. Kyle's name, after weeks of radio silence. Outside. Please. Heart in his throat, Charles stepped into the slushy street. Kyle stood under a bare tree, breath fogging the air, holding a bouquet of wilted daisies, Charles's favorite, a detail from their early days. I fucked up, Kyle said, voice raw. Broke us because I was a coward. But I'm done hiding. Charles's resolve cracked. What changed? Kyle stepped closer, snowflakes catching in his lashes. You. Without you, I'm half a man. I told Mike. Last week. Over beers. He was shocked. Yeah, called me a closet case. But he hugged me. Said he's got my back. Charles searched his face, seeing truth there, vulnerability. And your family? Not yet. But soon. With you, if you'll have me. The kiss that followed was snowmelt sweet, Kyle's arms wrapping around him like anchors. They tumbled back to Charles's apartment, shedding coats and inhibitions, making love with the urgency of second chances, slow builds to shattering releases, whispers of forever against sweat-damp skin. Spring teased with crocuses and longer days, their relationship blooming tentative but fierce. Public handholds at indie films, Brunches where Kyle introduced Charles as "my guy." The crew adapted. Sarah with sly grins, Jamal with bear hugs, Mike with awkward but earnest toasts. Kyle came out to Emily first. Her response, a teary "finally, you idiot," paved the way for the parental bomb. It dropped in April, over a tense Zoom from Ohio. Kyle's hands shook as he said it, Charles off-screen but gripping his knee. Mom cried shock, not rejection. Dad grunted discomfort but promised time. "We love you, son. Always." It wasn't parades and pride flags, but it was enough. Human. Real. By summer, they were solid, planning a road trip upstate, dreaming of a loft with space for Charles's easel and Kyle's guitar. But beneath the joy, a shadow stirred. Mike's offhand comment at a barbecue. "Kyle's gone full rainbow now." Ha! Landed like a pebble in still water, ripples spreading. Whispers in Kyle's crew, sidelong glances at job sites. And then, the betrayal Charles never saw coming. It started with a text from Sarah, "Check your email now." Attached was a screenshot chain from Mike's group chat, forwarded to her by a mutual. Kyle's name, bolded. Dudes playing both teams? Saw him with Charles at that party. Sketchy AF. Below, replies piled on emojis of side eyes. Jokes about confusion. One from Jamal, "Nah, Kyle's solid." But damn, plot twist. Charles's stomach plummeted. Kyle, home late from a site, found him on the couch. Phone clutched like a grenade. "What's wrong? You tell me." Charles thrust the screen forward. Kyle's face drained of color, scrolling through the venom. "That was months ago," he stammered. Before you what? Pretended it didn't happen?" Mike still talking shit. "Kyle. Because you let him think it's a phase. A joke." Kyle sank beside him, head in hands. "I thought it was buried. I told him the truth. Not all of it." Charles's voice was steel. "You minimized us. Made me the punchline." The argument raged. Old wounds reopening. Kyle accused Charles of paranoia. Charles hurled back accusations of half measures. Doors slammed. Silences stretched. In the end, Kyle left, not storming, but defeated, crashing at Mike's to sort shit. Days turned to a week. Charles haunting his studio like a ghost, painting fury in slashes of black and gold. Rosa warned him, "Don't let betrayal define you. But don't forgive blind." The climax crashed on a humid July night, thunderstorm rattling the windows as Charles prepped for his show. A knock, insistent, frantic. Kyle, drenched, eyes wild. "I ended it with Mike. Told the whole crew. Everything. No more secrets. And I told my parents about us. Fully. They're coming to the city. To meet you." Charles stared, rain pooling at Kyle's feet. "Why now?" "Because losing you is worse than any hate." Kyle dropped to his knees, not dramatic but broken. "I betrayed us, minimized you to save face. I'm sorry. Let me make it right." Thunder boomed, and Charles pulled him up, their embrace a dam against the flood. Forgiveness wasn't easy. Therapy dates, hard talks, boundaries drawn in blood, but it was theirs. The show was a triumph. Orbit sold to a collector who wept at the story behind it. Kyle's parents arrived awkward but warm. Mom hugging Charles like a long-lost son. Dad clapping his shoulder with a gruff, "Proud of my boy." Both of you. August baked the city into submission. Asphalt shimmering like a mirage. Air conditioners groaning in futile rebellion. Charles and Kyle's reconciliation was a fragile architecture. Beams of trust reinforced with conversations that stretched into dawn. Mortar of small gestures. Kyle's hand in his at bodega runs. Charles's sketches of them taped to the fridge like love letters. The betrayal with Mike lingered. A scar fading but visible. A reminder that love in America wasn't just fireworks. It was the slow burn of compromise. The grit of showing up when it hurt. Kyle threw himself into amends. He cut Mike out, not a blowout, but a quiet text. Can't do half-truths anymore. Respect my life, or step out. The crew fractured slightly. Jamal stayed loyal, hosting a recommitment cookout in his Astoria backyard where burgers charred and stories flowed. Sarah toasting with, "To the gays who make the rest of us look boring." Mike sent a half-assed apology via voicemail, slurred and insincere. Kyle deleted it, blocking the number. "Done feeding that fire," he told Charles, sealing it with a kiss that tasted like closure. The road trip they planned became reality. A beat-up rental Mustang pointed north to the Adirondacks, windows down, playlist a mix of Kyle's Boss and Charles's Hosier. Highways unfurled like veins, carrying them from concrete canyons to pine-scented wilderness. They hiked trails slick with summer rain, Kyle hoisting Charles over streams with laughs that echoed off granite faces. Nights in a creaky cabin, fire crackling, bodies entwined on a quilt, Kyle's fingers tracing constellations on Charles's back. "This is what I want," Kyle murmured one evening, stars pricking the sky through the skylight. "You, me, no masks." Charles believed him, the wilderness stripping pretenses. But America wasn't just wilds. It was the rearview mirror of pasts unresolved. On the drive back, radio scanning static. A call came. Emily, voice tight. "Kai, Mom's not doing great." The news is hitting her harder than she lets on. Dad's stonewalling, like always. Kyle's grip tightened on the wheel. "What do you mean?" "She's praying more. Asking about cures. Not mean, just confused. Loves you, but it's old school stuff." The cab fell silent. Charles's hand on Kyle's thigh a silent anchor. Back in the city, the weight settled. Family dinners via video turned stilted. Mom's smiles forced. Dad's questions veering to grandkids with pointed glances. Kyle internalized it, jaw clenching over breakfast, snapping at small things, a misplaced key, a late text. Charles saw the erosion. The way doubt crept back like ivy. September brought the equinox and a new rhythm. Kyle interviewing for supervisory roles, Charles's commissions piling up. They hosted their first dinner party. Candlelit pasta for Sarah and Jamal, laughter spilling into the hall. But mid-meal, Kyle's phone buzzed. "Dad." He stepped out, returning pale. "Site accident. One of the guys bad. I gotta go." The night dissolved. Charles cleaned up alone, worry gnawing. Kyle returned at 3 a.m., reeking of diesel and despair. The worker, a young immigrant named Raul, crushed under beams. DOA. "Happened on my watch," Kyle whispered, collapsing into Charles's arms. "I signed off on that scaffold." Grief bonded them deeper. Vigils at the site, Kyle testifying at the inquiry, Charles holding him through nightmares where steel groaned and faces blurred. In the aftermath, Kyle found purpose, pushing for safety reforms at the union, his voice steady in meetings where he'd once shrunk. "This is for Raul," he'd say, and Charles saw the man emerging. Not the golden boy, but a fighter, forged in loss. Yet conflict simmered. October's chill mirrored the frost in Kyle's family ties. A letter arrived, handwritten. Mom's looping script. We miss you, Kyle. Come home for Thanksgiving. Bring Charles if you must, but let's talk. God has a plan. Kyle crumpled it, hurling it across the room. A plan? For what? To fix me. Charles picked it up, smoothing the creases. Maybe it's an olive branch. Messy, but real. The fight that followed was their ugliest. Kyle accusing Charles of naivety, Charles firing back about walls rebuilt higher. You're letting them win, hiding behind anger instead of facing it. I face it every day, Kyle roared, veins bulging. Waking up terrified, you'll wake up and see the fraud I am. The word fraud landed like shrapnel. Charles recoiled, old insecurities flaring. Is that what I am to you? A performance? No, God. No. Kyle deflated, sinking to the floor. I'm the fraud. Bisexual, gay, whatever label. Scares the shit out of me because it means admitting I was wrong about everything. Charles knelt, cupping his face. You're not wrong. You're human. And so am I. They didn't make love that night. Too raw, but slept entwined, breaths sinking in the dark. Morning brought decisions. Thanksgiving in Ohio. No shields. Together, Kyle said, sealing it with coffee and a kiss. The flight was turbulence incarnate, mirroring the knots in Charles's gut. Ohio unfolded in flat fields and faded billboards. Kyle's childhood home a rancher in a cul-de-sac of cookie cutters. Mom enveloped them in hugs scented with Chanel No. 5. Dad's handshake firm but eyes averted. Emily buffered with baby coos and pie, but dinner was a minefield. Small talk skittering over politics, weather, anything but them. Cracked post-pumpkin pie, in the den with its floral couch and cross-stitched psalms. Mom set down her tea, hands twisting. Kyle, we've prayed. Talk to Pastor. He says. It's a test. But we love you. Always. Kyle's fork clattered. A test? Mom, this isn't a phase. Charles isn't a mistake. Dad cleared his throat, face ruddy. Son, the Bible is open to interpretation, Charles interjected softly, surprising himself. Like love. It bends, but doesn't break. The room held breath. Mom teared up, reaching for Kyle's hand. Tell us about him. About you too. What followed was halting. Holy. Kyle's voice cracking on college confessions. Charles sharing studio stories. Laughter bubbling when Emily teased about wedding colors. Dad didn't convert overnight. Grunts over football reruns masked discomfort. But he poured Charles's scotch neat. A silent truce. Back in New York, the thaw deepened. Kyle proposed safety workshops in Raoul's name. Charles's show toured to a Buffalo gallery. Romance reignited. A weekend in the Hamptons, borrowed from Sarah, where they walked beaches at dawn, Kyle sketching hearts in sand. Marry me? He asked one night, ringless but earnest, under a meteor shower. Charles laughed, tears salting his lips. Yes, but with rings. And cake. Betrayal's echo faded, replaced by building joint bank accounts. A lease on a Greenpoint brownstone with a garden plot for Mom's recipes. But climax loomed, unbidden. November's chill carrying whispers of Kyle's past resurfacing. It hit like a nor'easter. An email from an old college hookup. A girl named Tara, saw your coming out post on FB. Congrats, but remember Ibiza? That night, thought you should know Charles. Attached, blurry photos. Kyle entangled with her and another. Spring break haze. Charles found it open on Kyle's laptop. Innocent, left logged in during a shower. The world tilted. Dates blurring into betrayal. Kyle's straight history weaponized. When Kyle emerged, towel-clad, Charles thrust the screen forward. Explain. Kyle's face crumpled. Ibiza sophomore year. I was drunk, lost. It was stupid, meaningless. A way to prove something to myself. To yourself? Or to hide? Charles's voice shattered. You said you fought this for years. But here's proof. You dove headfirst into denial. Kyle reached, desperate. It was before us. Before I knew. Knew what? That you could love a man? Or that it might cost you? Charles backed away, chest heaving. I forgave Mike's shit talk. But this? Is you, Kyle. Your choices. The storm broke. Accusations flying. Kyle begging on knees slick with shower water. Don't let this end us. I chose you every day. Charles fled to the studio. Door locked. Painting through sobs, figures fracturing into shards. Days passed in limbo. Kyle's texts a barrage of pleas. Bouquets wilting on the stoop. Rosa urged space. Betrayal's a thief. Decide if he's worth the chase. The turning point came at the gym, their origin. Full circle. Charles went alone, pounding the treadmill until lungs burned. When Kyle appeared, sweat-drenched from a solo set. No words, just a nod to the ring corner, gloves on, sparring pads up. They danced, fists glancing off pads, breaths ragged. Each hit a release. Charles's grief, Kyle's guilt. Midway, Kyle dropped the pads, pulling Charles into a clinch. Hit me for real if you need to. But hear me, I was a kid, scared. That night, regret, not revelation. You're my truth. Charles sagged against him, the gym's mirrors reflecting two men stripped bare. I need time. But don't stop fighting. December returned, softer this time, snow blanketing the city in hush rather than havoc. Charles and Kyle's limbo stretched into tentative bridges, coffee meetups in neutral cafes, walks in the park where fallen leaves crunched underfoot like fragile truces. The Ibiza photos haunted, a specter Charles dissected in therapy, Rosa calling it ghosts of performative straightness, a phase Kyle had outgrown but whose shadow lingered. Forgiveness wasn't linear. It was loops and detours, but Kyle's persistence wore down the walls. Daily calls, no pressure texts, thinking of your laugh. A new tattoo on his ribcage, a small orbit, inked in Charles's presence. Christmas was theirs alone. A tree scavenged from the curb, strung with drugstore lights, ornaments hand-painted by Charles, tiny scenes of their year, the rainy kiss, the Adirondack stars. Kyle cooked, burnt turkey redeemed by perfect mashed potatoes, and they exchanged gifts wrapped in newsprint. Charles a leather-bound journal for Kyle's half-formed songs, Kyle a custom easel with adjustable heights. For our forever, he said, voice thick, and Charles believed, pulling him under the mistletoe for a kiss that tasted of pine and promise. The new year dawned with resolve. Kyle enrolled in a queer men's group at the center, emerging with vocabulary for his bisexuality, not a bridge or a phase, but a spectrum he walked proudly. Charles joined for a session, their hands linked in the circle, sharing stories that drew nods and tears. Family mended incrementally. Mom's care packages arrived with rainbow socks slipped in, Dad's emails evolving from weather reports to Met scores. With a postscript, tell Charles good eye on that last painting. Saw it online. Spring 2026 bloomed with momentum. Kyle's promotion came with a corner office metaphorical, but he dedicated the raise to a Raoul Memorial Fund, unveiling a plaque at the site with Charles at his side, hands clasped against whispers from old crew holdouts. Charles's career crested. A residency in LA offered, but he negotiated remote, tethering to New York. To Kyle. Conflict resurfaced in May, subtle as ivy. Kyle's restlessness. Late nights scrolling job boards for out-of-state gigs. Better pay. Fresh start. Charles sensed the undercurrent, the pull of escape from city's judgmental gaze. Is it us? Or the noise? He asked one night, rooftop bar overlooking the East River. Fairy lights winking like conspirators. Kyle swirled his gin. Honest. Both. I love here with you. But sometimes. The stares. The supportive jabs from Dad. Feels like we're still proving. Charles nodded, the river's murmur echoing his fear. We are. Every day. But running builds nothing. The talk evolved into plans. A joint therapy retreat in the Berkshires, weekends unplugging in the cabin they'd claimed as theirs. Vulnerability became their kink. Nights where confessions spilled over wine, leading to lovemaking fierce and tender, bodies mapping scars both seen and unseen. Summer solstice marked the peak. A commitment ceremony, backyard affair in Emily's Ohio yard neutral ground. Mom's roses blooming defiant. No vows exchanged, just promises whispered. Rings simple platinum bands, engraved orbit. Guests were eclectic. Sarah officiating with body jokes. Jamal DJing Springsteen remixes. Rosa toasting with sage advice. Dad danced with Mom to Dancing in the Dark. Awkward shuffles hiding tears. Charles caught him later, clapping Kyle's back. You did good, son. Real good. But climax crested not in joy, but quiet storm. August heat wave trapped them in the brownstone. AC sputtering defeat. Kyle came home early, face ashen. A letter from his union. Anonymous complaint. Unprofessional conduct. Personal life bleeding into work. Attached. Printouts of old Ibiza pics. Circulated like currency among skeptics. Betrayal's second wave crashed. Who? Charles demanded, pacing the kitchen. Tiles cool under bare feet. Doesn't matter. Kyle's voice was lead. It's the same shit, fear dressed as morality. Raoul's fund? They're auditing it now. Saying favoritism. Charles pulled him close, fury channeling to steel. Fight it. We fight. They did, lawyers consulted. Emails drafted. Kyle's group rallying testimonials. The audit cleared, shoddy work exposed as grudge. But the toll carved deep. Kyle spiraled, nights pacing the garden, muttering about escape to quieter shores. Charles anchored, but cracks showed. Arguments over futures. Charles's LA offers tempting as sirens. The breaking or making came in September, anniversary eve. A blackout plunged the city dark, candles flickering like fireflies. They sat on the fire escape, wine shared from jelly jars, city a constellation below. I almost left once, Kyle confessed, voice soft against the hum of generators. After Ibiza. Packed a bag. Thought California could fix me. Charles's breath caught. What stopped you? You. Called me at 2 a.m. Drunk dial about some shitty poem. I realized nowhere fixes you. But you make me whole. Tears tracked Charles's cheeks. And now? Still running. Kyle set down the jar. Kneeling in the tight space. Echo of that rainy night. No. I'm staying. Building. With you. He pulled a velvet box from his pocket. Not proposal, but renewal. Rings etched deeper. Orbit eternal. Marry me. For real. Courts. Cakes. Chaos. Charles laughed through sobs. Yes, tumbling out. They made love on the escape. Stars witnesses. Bodies urgent against the rail. Fall deepened their roots. Wedding plans sketched over brunches. A simple city hall affair with rooftop reception. Conflicts arose. Mom's insistence on church. Dad's health scare forcing vulnerability, but humanism prevailed. Compromises. Conversations. Love as verb. November 16th, 2026. 1 year from that fated gym night. Found them on a bench in Prospect Park. Leaves gold and gone. Kyle's head on Charles's shoulder. Hands linked. Rings glinting. What now? Charles asked. The future a blank canvas. Kyle smiled. That sun-bright grin undimmed. Everything. The messy. The beautiful. Us. No tidy bows, no betrayals erased. No families flawless. But in the American dream's grit, they carved theirs. 2 men. Orbiting eternal. In a city that bent but never broke them. Love. Humanistic and hard-won. Whispered enough. As dusk fell, Kyle kissed Charles's temple. Forever starts here, and it did.